The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the Nova Society are those of our guests and panel members and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any institution any member of the Nova Society is associated with. The material information presented on the Nova Society is for general information purposes only. Reproduction or dissemination for the purpose other than education is prohibited without express written consent of the Nova Society. We'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society, and today we're going to take a question from a listener who is asking about the recent news that earlier this month, the Israeli government sanctioned 5 new settlements in the West Bank. And the listener's asking, what does this mean for the war in Gaza? What does this mean for peace in the region? And also, they want to know, why has Bibi Netanyahu survived this long with so many bad decisions being made? So we'll take on that question. Let's listen in.
Okay, so this one is from Paul in Bangor, Maine. And Paul is asking, earlier this month, Israel authorized the largest land seizure in the West Bank since the 1990s. So what does this mean for the war in Gaza and Israeli relations or relationships with the rest of the world? A recent report by the Israeli military specifically blamed Bibi for this entire crisis. And how is he still surviving?
How is Bibi still surviving?
Yes.
Well, I don't think he'll survive for long, but they do have to, it's going to be orderly. They're going to have it's going to be an election. They're not, I don't think anybody's going to stage a coup or anything like that in Israel.
Okay.
But I also think that he's going to pay the price. I mean, we've been over this a million times, and should pay the price for what he's done to Israel and on behalf of Israel both, but mainly to Israel. He's going to pay that. He's going to pay that price.
Sorry, where it says here that he authorized the largest land seizure in the West Bank, where is the land seizure in the West Bank? I mean, geographically or topographically, relative to where Gaza is? 'Cause I haven't been paying attention, me personally, so I don't even know where this particular piece of land is. So this is apparently the largest land seizure since the 1990s. Where is that relative to where Gaza is?
Okay, so I would say look at Gaza as being, say, Camden, New Jersey, and the West Bank would be Elizabeth, New Jersey, not that far.
Okay, so when we're talking about the largest land seizure since the 1990s, how large is large? Just so our listeners who, like me, don't know that much about it. How big is big? I mean, how much land are we talking? And what is this going to be for? Is this like a buffer between North and South Korea? Or is this to live on? Or nobody knows? It's just a land seizure just to say, okay, we're going to take more land?
All right. So I think what we have to understand is the role of B'nai Smotrich in the Israeli government. Okay.
Who is
he
this?
Is the finance. Bezalel Smotrich is a finance minister of Israel. He's in the cabinet. Smotrich is his last name, and he himself is a settler. He's a far right extremist. He's in the government right now, and he has been holding on to money that was earmarked to go for Palestinian aid, going to the Palestinian Authority. And what he ended up doing was, a week or so ago, traded about $136 million to go to the Palestinian Authority in exchange for the legalization of 5 more settlements in the north of the West Bank.
So where did the money go?
So the money is supposed to go to the Palestinian Authority for humanitarian purposes. I don't know what the Palestinian Authority does with it, but clearly there's some horse trading going on, and the settlements are for the most part, very rudimentary buildings, have to be guarded by soldiers. It creates a lot of problems for Israel and of course the entire world when they do these settlements. But it's all part of the game that's being played right now between the Israeli right and the rest of the country and the rest of the world. It should be and has been condemned, right? I think the G7 condemned the settlements. The United States is sanctioning settlers. We're on the side of sort of get rid of these settlements in a gentle way. Some might say too gentle, but it's neither here nor there. We know that the settlers can be removed by the IDF if there's a will to do so and if there's a reason to do so. We know that the settlers are violent and disruptive. We can expect more of this as a peace deal becomes more apparent and a truce becomes more viable. There's going to be more violence by the extremists in both the Palestinian side and the Israeli side. It's just the reality. The closer they get to peace, the more violence there's going to be. It's kind of like Jeff McNeil not doing so well after winning the batting title. And it's just one of those crazy things that happens in the Middle East. But as far as Israeli politics is concerned, I do believe that this situation, as slowly as it is, will wind down. The war in Gaza will wind down. A truce will be struck. Hopefully, living hostages will be released. I'm a little leery about that part of it because so many of the hostages really ended up being dead people that the Hamas just brought back to Gaza to keep hope alive for trading purposes, which is really sick. But that has been the case, and and that this situation will somehow resolve itself over the next couple of months.
So, sorry, Mark, I don't mean to cut you off.
Fine.
If this, so the money is supposed to go to
the money. The money went. Brooke, the money went to the Palestinian Authority,
but without settlements and without land in exchange. Correct? It's simply supposed to be humanitarian aid.
Right, with settlements. So 5 new settlements were made legal, right? Generally speaking, what happens is the settlers move to a new area. It's condemned for being illegal, and then they fight and they try to get they fight politically to try to get the settlements declared legal. And that's what they've just done. 5 new settlements, and in exchange for $135 million going to the Palestinian Authority.
But then this simply causes more problems. So I'm not following why the same. I'm not following why the same policy repeated and repeated and repeated when the same outcome that is known is going to keep recurring. To me, it's senseless. What you understand?
I would say that senseless is a good word for it. It is senseless. There are different people with different agendas who are fighting for their agenda, and in a democracy, you accommodate people's agendas to get something else that you want. There's a lot of horse trading going on right now. And so in exchange for this money going to the Palestinian Authority, yes, the government had to give the extremists 5 more settlements. In the long run, yes, it causes more problem. It's, I don't know what else to say about it. We're in a horrible situation right now. The right wingers there are good at what they do, and they're doing what they do, and It's real unfortunate, and it's going to have to be fixed at some point, but it's not going to get fixed until there's a new government.
Okay, so that's what stops the merry-go-round or the carousel from spinning endlessly, in your view. They need a new government, a middle of the ground, whatever, who's not going to pursue the same ridiculous policy that simply spins the wheel endlessly. Yes?
Right, but at some point, the Israeli people have to feel secure enough that they're willing to live, yards away from people who are swearing to kill them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's obviously a very difficult thing for people to do.
Right.
I think all along, this situation could have been settled if the Palestinians put down their weapons and said, "Okay, we're willing to deal." But that has never happened, and it's unlikely to happen anytime soon. And so as you said, we have this merry-go-round that goes on. Neither side is willing to give everything without getting something back. And it's been very, very difficult for the Israelis to say, wow, we feel so secure that we can just live our lives and let them live their lives. They're highly intertwined. And, the Palestinian attack on October 7th certainly has thrown the country into turmoil, and they're reacting as people in turmoil.
Yeah. Well, we've got the prisoner's dilemma and the tit for tat escalation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Mark, your thoughts?
I think Scott pretty much covered it exactly. I don't really have much to add to that. The only thing I could say is that and I agree with Scott, every time Israel does something like this, it just promotes very negative opinion worldwide. That's something that they also have to start considering, because Israel really could use some support. And I think that it's counterproductive. It probably is maybe a piece to a very larger puzzle. I would think that would be the case. It just, unless it is a bigger piece of a bigger puzzle, then it just seems kind of counterproductive to me. As to why Bibi Netanyahu has survived, politicians are very good at that. Why he survived to this point, it is what it is. That's what politicians do. And if you want to look at, that example, look right here to the United States, and you're going to see some politicians where you say, my God, how the heck did he stay in or she stay in? And they're still here. So that's it for that one.
Actually, no, I have one more question for Scott about this. Would would something like a two-state solution with a DMZ that was guarded by the UN? I mean, there must be something.
Yeah, I don't think the Israelis are going to ever allow the UN to be peacekeepers for them again. It hasn't worked out in the past, so it'll be Israeli troops.
Israeli troops, whatever. A DMZ and what I mean, it doesn't, whatever it needs to look like. But I mean, I recognize that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tall order. I guess they felt safe and secure in their homes, in their kibbutzes, in their towns. These were not settlements. They were in Israel on 10/7. They were not, the Palestinians in Gaza did not target settlements. They targeted towns in Israel itself, and not in the West Bank or in Gaza. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be tough for the Israelis to accept a government that says we're going to have a two-state solution, and as I said, yards away from us after 10/7, our enemies are going to have autonomy, and they're going to have to be watched. There's going to have to be security, and there's going to be more violence to make it even harder to get there. So what the United States is doing right now is sanctioning specific settlers and organizations that are trying to add these outposts and these settlements in the West Bank. and to raise the price of them creating these new settlements, but they're unable to stop them. We can only sanction them. Yes, there are people right now in the Israeli government who are so extreme and right wing that they probably should be sanctioned as well. But again, sanctions only go so far. It's not it's not the same thing as making something happen. It's not violence. It's a political stance. It might hit them, make fundraising more difficult, but this is very tough stuff. And
Yep.
the situation in Israel and in Gaza and in the West Bank are very, very complex, made more complex by the violence on both sides of this conflict. There are people on both sides who could make peace, but for them to be elected, in the case of Israel, there's the Israeli people are going to have confidence that they can stop this violence from happening to them.
Right. And of course, there are people who want violence, and
or violence. In their case, violence is an means to an end, and the end is for there to be nothing but Jews living in the entire West Bank and Israel. And on the other side, the elimination of Israel altogether. Those are the extremes.
So are we talking, in your view, additional generations then now because of 10/7?
It's possible, but it's also possible that the diplomacy and the desire for Saudi Arabia to sort of normalize relations with Israel could end up being decisive. Again, it's a hard sell, let's put it that way. And it's going to require somebody who's extremely good at selling this solution to the Israeli people and to basically every Muslim in the world, and probably a lot of people who aren't well versed in this, who have been more and more anti-Semitic since October 7th than they were, at least outwardly, beforehand. We see that more and more, both here in the United States and in Europe, and obviously that's not helping the matter at all. I I think that Joe Biden is doing a reasonably good job at mediating this thing to the extent that could be done. If Donald Trump became president again, he would probably turn to the Israelis and say, "You go ahead and wipe out the Palestinians as much as you want, and I'll stand by you." And that would be probably a really bad thing for the Israelis to do, but I believe that Trump would give them that permission.
Yeah, and, he's given to Putin what he wants.
Who can say what happens from there? I mean, if you remember, the way he decided to handle the Afghanistan withdrawal was by ignoring the Afghan government that we had propped up for 20-something years and trying to make peace with the Taliban. And even when the Taliban violated that peace by killing members of the Afghan government, he just put his head down and said, "I'm still willing to make peace with you as long as you don't kill any American soldiers. I will make peace with you." And it didn't matter how much they destabilized the Afghan government, and eventually that Afghan government collapsed before we could even get our troops out and so many other people. So these are complicated situations that are made worse by people who think that there are simple solutions to them. And anybody who thinks that there's a simple solution to this problem is, number one, lying, and number two, part of the problem.
Yep. Thank you.
So that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this week's episode, the Phoenix Research Group, an independent research consortium offering social issue solutions to NGOs and international government agencies through multidisciplinary, nonpartisan, and unbiased research. We'd also like to thank our podcast partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Podkite, who does all our analytics, iHeartRadio, where people get their music and podcasts, Apple iTunes, the largest source of music and podcasts on the internet, Spotify, the most popular source for the Nova Society. The Nova Society is available on all these and other quality platforms mentioned in our description. We'd like to thank our listeners. Without you, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a comment, a question, or would like to be a guest on the Nova Society, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. Always remember, the power of society is knowledge. So for Dr. Scott Gershworth, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Be well, and we hope to see you again next time.